Hello everyone, it's Crystal. Happy World Card Making Day. I just wanted to jump on to do this quick tutorial. I didn't announce it because I wasn't sure when I could actually start the tutorial. It is 4:05 on Saturday, October 3rd. So first I want to remind everyone to share your photos from last night's workshop for the Simply Citrus card making kit. Share it on Facebook or Instagram today. Make sure you use this hashtag and you will be entered to win a prize. And the winner will be announced tomorrow, October 4th, on my Facebook page for the Interwoven Creations by Crystal Facebook page. So a quick reminder for that. So last night we used a kit, but whenever you make a card, you want to, when someone says a basic card or a standard A2 size card, they're talking about a card that when it's folded, it is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But you can take a letter size piece of cardstock, and there's two ways you can cut the cardstock. You can cut the cardstock so that it's 4 1/4 by 11. So you cut it the long way. And then you would score it at 5 1/2. And we'll get to scoring in a minute. This is the score line. Also, you can cut it the short way. It'll be 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. And you would score it at 4 1/4. And once again, this is the score line. Last night, I mentioned the scoring tool that I used. I got it from Amazon. It doesn't work that well because you can't, like, even if I hold it here, you can barely see the numbers. They're etched in. I'm going to buy the Stampin' Up! Scoring tool so that the numbers are painted on. So these are the scoring lines right here. So if you're scoring at 5 1/2, you would lay your paper this way, and 5 1/2 is right here. And then you would just draw your line. And similarly, if you have the shorter paper, 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, you would line it up this way. And the 4 1/4 line is right here, and you would score it. So that's the basic. These are two basic card bases. So whenever you want to make a card, an A2 size card, there are other dimensions for different cards, but for basic card making, an A2 size card is what you would start with. So you would start with one of these card bases. This is my favorite size, and this is my favorite orientation. I like it to flip up. So I would take this card base, and then I like to do a lot of layers. If I'm mailing a card through the postal service, I don't put a whole lot of layers because that increases the weight, and so that increases the postage. But if I'm putting a card in with another package, then I like to do layers. So since this is 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, I usually take a half of an inch off my layer. So my layer would be 5 by 4 1/4 inch. So 5 1/4 by 4. I just cut that. So here's a layer that I made. It's embossed. This is the embossing folder that I use. It's called the Garden Trellis Embossing Folder. I have an electronic embossing and cutting machine. Stampin' Up! Sells one, but it's manual. And I have issues with my rotator cuff, so I needed an electronic machine. But I have seen some of the people that I'm on the team with, and they have it, and they swear by it. But I don't have that because I can't really do cranking with, there's a crank. So it cranks through, and you can crank it both ways, but I can't do that. So I use my electronic one, and this is how I store my embossing folders. This is a piece of cardstock, and then I have a contrasting piece of cardstock that I put through the embossing machine with the folder, and then I just adhered it to this piece of cardstock. I can show you in a different video if you're interested in this. I don't know if anyone owns embossing folders yet, but this is just one way that I found that is helpful for me. And then I label it with the brand and the name of the embossing folder. So I would, for my card, I would just put a layer on like that. Sometimes I like to use dies, since with my embossing machine it also cuts dies. And these are metal dies. These are by Stampin' Up. This is from a bundle that I bought previously. And here's my sample. I use the largest die. And it cuts out, this is not the largest die. This is the largest die. And it cuts the paper. And you see there's some stitching here. And there's a scalloped edge. So that's another layer I could put on my card. So you start with your card base and then you layer up however, I mean, you can go as thick as you want, as heavy as you want, but just be mindful of postage issues. Let me just take off, this is 4, it's just a little bit more. All right, there we go. All right, that is better. So there's another, so you can label it with an embossed layer. You can do a die cut layer. And actually after you cut this, you can put it through an embossing folder and emboss this as well. And then you have another option. If you have a punch. So if you have a punch, I have several punches. This punch, it comes in a set of 2. These 2 punches, they go with this Christmas Gleaming stamp set. It comes as a bundle. You can buy the stamp set or you can buy the punches, but if you buy them together, you get a 10% discount. So I've already used this. I made a project with it. These are the red rubber stamps. So I'm going to just show you. These are my extras I had from a project, because when I do a project, I usually just cut, don't really know what I'm going to do exactly. And then, like for example, here is one of the ornaments. So I can take my D block, here's my D block, and I can put this on my D block. Hi, Denise. So this side of this side of the stamp shows what the design will be once you stamp it. I have some Memento black ink. I'm going to stamp it in black just so that there's a high contrast. And I have a scrap piece of paper. So I keep this upside down so that the ink can come to the top of the ink pad. So once I take the top off, you'll see. That's the ink pad. So I'm left-handed, so most things are going to be on the left side. So I just tap, tap, tap. And then I just place it on the paper face down, hold it for a few seconds, hold the paper down, and lift straight up. So and then I turn over the stamp while I'm waiting. So that's the stamped image. So if I'm going to go to a different color, I clean my stamps in between the colors. Like last night, we only had one color, so it didn't matter. But put the top back on this, turn it over. And so I have a chamois. It starts off purple. It's wet. And I keep it in an old stamp case. So I just rub it and the stamp is clean. So I do that when I go from a dark to a light color. So we have our basic, this is our basic card. So we have 2 layers. We have the card base, and then we have this embossed layer that we could use if we wanted, and then we have this die cut layer if we want to use it. So that stamp set I just mentioned, the Christmas Gleaming stamp set, it goes with these dies. So in order to open a die, you just push this forward and it pops open. So we're going to cut this die. I'm going to have to cut the paper. So this goes in here. Line it up. I usually squeeze it a little bit to hold it until, all right, there we go. I'm a perfectionist, so this is probably not something I should, all right, that's good enough. And then you just squeeze it and it pops out. So you have two options for this. You can glue this on directly with adhesive. You can use some Stampin' Dimensionals. That'll give it some height. It'll pop up off the paper, but just be mindful when you're mailing that it may or may not get there. And because I did 4 cards back in May and sent it to 4 of my close friends, and 2 of the friends said, "Oh, thank you for the card," but the other 2 didn't. And I know if they received the card, they would have said thank you. So I think they were too thick. I didn't realize that. I don't know where the cards are now, but just let me be a lesson to you. Just be careful with the dimensionals when you're mailing cards, no matter what size cards you're using, unless you're doing some kind of flat rate or it's in a package. So you can layer it up however you want. You can do ribbons. You can do other kinds of embellishments. I wasn't able to get into that last night because the setup wasn't. This is a better setup for me to show you all of your options. So now there is we already used the red rubber stamps. So they come as one big piece. Then you have to add these labels on. So I usually just break them up as soon as I get them. Like they come like this as one big rectangle. And then I break them up when I'm about to use them. The other type of stamp is the photopolymer stamps. They're the clear ones, similar to the ones we used last night. So this is from the Life is Beautiful stamp set. So I've used this for a project. I brought this stamp set out because I wanted to show you this tree. This tree is big, and at the time, this was the biggest block I had, so that doesn't fit. See, it's hanging off the side. So I have a stamp positioning tool. It's called the Stamparatus, and it's a great tool, especially if you're doing mass production. So when it's time to do Christmas cards, or if you have a big stamp like this, it comes with 2 plates. I just have 1 plate on now, and it has a hinge. So you just lift it straight up, put it down. Now this mat here, this is an advanced mat. It actually comes with this mat. But I bought the advanced mat so I can have the grid line so I can line up my paper perfectly because there's no numbers on here. So I use this when I'm doing photopolymer stamping just to have the little bit of lift right there. So once you have your paper, I'm going to get another scrap paper. So I decide, say this is a layer or a card base. You can always cut it down later. I like to have larger pieces and then cut it down. And I stay away from this corner because you really have to press to get the image on the paper. So I line it up with this line. There's no particular line. And these magnets are very powerful. So you don't want them close to one another because they will snap and break. So just put my paper down. Say if, for instance, I want my tree right here. So this is the flat side. That's going to go onto the panel, the glass panel for Stamparatus. It's similar to, this is like a glorified stamping block. So say if I want my tree right here in the middle, put it on the paper, flat side face up, close the Stamparatus, press, and I lift up the stamp. That's why the magnets are here. So I will get a stamping spot. since just to make it easy to stamp up. This is called Blackberry Bliss. I don't think any of us have seen a blackberry tree, but just for purposes of the demonstration, I tap, tap, tap. Oops. And because of the position of the hinges, I put a stamp pad underneath just so that I can make sure I get even coverage. All right. See, I think my Blackberry Bliss has seen better days, but here we go. And I usually use a piece of tissue paper to just make sure I'm pressing down. And then I lift the stamp apparatus. Perfect. So if I really wanted to get this area here, I would just simply, I'm fine with it. It's a tree. It's not supposed to look absolutely perfect. But if I wanted to get this area, if I wasn't happy with that, I would just stamp some more. And then just rub this area. And it's darker. So you get perfect stamping with this stamp apparatus tool. So that's very helpful if you have large stamps. So, and then I would just take my chamois, take it out of the case, and just wipe it. And with the angle, it's easier for me just to do this. So once we would have our card bases and our layers, then we would layer it up however we wanted. And then we would stamp a sentiment. I'm going to stamp Merry Christmas on that. Even though we're not going to put the card together. I just want to move this out of the way. So, and another thing with the difference between the photopolymer stamps and the red rubber stamps is that you see there's a cushion here with the red rubber stamps. So I can stamp from here directly on the table. If I use this stamp, since I have the stamp, when I used the stamp apparatus, that lined mat was also cushioned. So if I'm going to stamp with the photopolymer stamp on the table, I like to use this. So these two go together when I'm stamping on the table. So I'm going to do Merry Christmas over here, and then we're going to be done. Let's see, put Merry Christmas, just putting this on the stamping block. And I'm going to use Real Red. Real Red is one of the ink colors. Here's the little notch. You just push the notch up, flip it back, and slide it. So that's the reason I keep the Memento Black upside down, because once this is closed, this ink pad is actually upside down. So gravity is working with it. So that's Merry Christmas. Tap, tap, tap. And I'm going to just stamp it on this right here in the lower right-hand corner. Hold it and lift. So this is our stamp image. So if I was making a card, I have a lot of Christmas stamp sets. Actually, Christmas is my favorite holiday. So I could put that together. I wouldn't use the blue, but I just wanted to show you some with the contrast. So that's basic card making. I'm just going to review really quickly. We have, let me just close this. Just pull this close, pull, flip, snap. And then I put it on my case. So you have a basic A2 size card. You can have the 4.5 by 11 scored at 5.5. And then you can have the one we use, which is my preference, the 5.5 by 8.5, and it's scored at 4 1/4. So you can have it flipped this way, or you can have it flipped that way. And for this one, you have the long way, or you can have it like this. And build your layers however creative you want to be. You can use designer series paper. You can use, this is cardstock, and I put it through my embossing folder, and then I cut it down to size. So I cut it smaller than I wanted it originally. I changed my mind. So this is what this embossing folder looks like on blue. This is how I store them. That's the folder. It's plastic. And you can see this is the raised side. This is the indented side. So this is the front. So the image will come up. So originally I put the paper in like this. When I take it out, the texture is raised up. So that's an option. You can always emboss your layers. You can die cut your layers. I use this die cut, this largest die. I put it on a larger piece of paper. This side that's up, the flat side is away from the paper. So the side with the cutting that will do the cutting faces the paper. And I say that just in case you have paper that has a print on it, because you want to make sure you see the stitching. In this case, this is a stitch die, because for a designer series paper, that paper is double-sided. So you just have to make sure you put the die on the correct side that is face up for your project. And now it also goes through a machine, and depending on which die cutting machine you have, that will tell you which sandwich to use for your dies. So that's also a possibility. And then you have punches. You can stamp your punches first. I actually have, with this paper, the Christmas gleaming, since I have the bundle, I have this and the 2 punches that I showed you. But I also have the designer series paper that goes with this suite. So with that paper, if it's very pretty, it has some foiling in it. So if I took that paper and I punched it out, then I would have an ornament that's really shiny, Christmas gleaming. So that's one of the reasons I bought this set, because I like the paper to go with it. So that's an option for when you're making your cards. And then you have your sentiments. I usually stamp my sentiments just on a scrap piece of paper, and then I cut it down, because sometimes you don't want to stamping it directly on the paper. That's a little dangerous, because if you mess up, then you have to cut that all over again. So I usually stamp first, then I put it through the die cutting machine. And I showed you how to clean your stamps. If you don't have a chamois, you can always use a baby wipe, but just be mindful that the baby wipes leave a little bit of lint. See? Clean. So, and for adhesives, you can use Stampin' Dimensionals. Stampin' Up! Sells tape runners. I do a lot of crafting, so I don't have those. So I bought this from Amazon. But if you're only good, so you could use the Stampin' Up! Rolling adhesive. There we go. But I do a lot of crafting, so I needed this. Do what works best for you and your crafts. If you have any questions, feel free to to ask me. I'm about to see what photos people have shared for World Card Making Day. After midnight tonight, Eastern Time, I'm going to do the Wheel Decide, and we'll see who is going to win the final prize for the World Card Making Day weekend. Let me just say it was a weekend weekend activity. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great Saturday. Continue to enjoy World Card Making Day. Thank you.